Hi there, podcast listeners. This is Margot Escott with Improv Interviews, and I'm so excited today to be introducing you to my friend Jeff Winter, who is a PhD intern and lives in Massachusetts. He's not only involved in psychology, but he's also an improviser, and we met through our mutual friends at Therapy Players, Dave Carbonell, as well as Kristen Kruger. Good morning.
Hello. Great to be here.
It's great to see you after we had a few little trials and errors getting going today.
Yes, no problem.
So tell me, what got you interested in psychology field? Did you know that from an early age, like at 5 years old, you were analyzing your parents, or?
Yeah, my mother is a social worker and my dad is a physician, so clinical psychology is kind of the middle path between those two. And so I was interested in, I thought maybe I wanted to be a teacher or a social worker, something like that when I was earlier in high school. And then I took AP Psychology in high school and found that I could sort of combine all the things that I was interested in. And then when I was in college, I went to Grinnell College, which is a liberal arts college in central Iowa, and I studied psychology and philosophy. And that was sort of a great combination of things for clinical psychology, because clinical psychology is about helping people manage the human experience and human suffering. And so philosophy has lots of big ideas about that, and then clinical psychology has strategies to actually do that.
That's right. And I think we share a common theme is that we want to help people.
Yes.
I want to help people. After 34 years, you may not be so energetic, but congratulations on coming in. I don't mean to sound cynical.
No.
I still love what I do. I go into work every day, and I'm hoping I can help somebody today. Help somebody, totally. Mostly with anxiety. I work a lot with anxiety, help to decrease anxiety. And I know you have one of your specialties is with children, isn't it? You work with children. Some of your papers are on children.
Yep, exactly. So I want to do a PhD because clinical psychology PhD allows you to get training as a clinician scientist. So you train as a clinician doing psychotherapy and assessment, and then also teaching like college and graduate level courses, and then also in doing scientific research. And so most of my research is in developmental psychopathology, which is the development of mental health problems with the hope of then informing psychotherapeutic interventions for things like adolescent depression, anxiety, emotion dysregulation, trauma exposure, stuff like that. And so that's a lot of what I've been involved with. And so my clinical work has been, a mix of working with kids, teens, young adults, groups, families, all that kind of stuff.
And that brings us to one of the best interventions that I've been using, and I think you've been using as well, which is improvisational comedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in a lot of group work, the overlap between sort of psychotherapy training and traditional like theater improvisation or comedy improv training, the overlaps are undeniable. And I kept having these experiences in graduate school in particular, hearing things from my psychologist supervisors that sounded very similar to things I had learned from my improv teachers and fellow actors, and was trying to find the way of sort of putting these pieces together. And I think the reason why I've been successful in improv and in psychology is because of overlapping things in terms of things that I'm good at or like doing at least.
Exactly. So what are some of those examples? Can you think of some of the examples that tie-ins between psychology and improv and some of the games maybe? Yeah,
so this is all speaking from my personal just sort of like perspective. For better or worse, there's been a lot of research. I'll answer your question via this. So because I'm trained as like a researcher, a scientist, so most of these things we don't have a formal research basis to say that these things work in improv or do change these types of emotion, thought, behavior patterns. However, many of the sort of theory or framework behind what works in psychotherapy and the theory and framework behind what works in good improv comedy are overlapping. For example, like the foundational idea or one of the foundational ideas in improv is the yes and, right? So you're trying to build a world together or create realities. In psychotherapy, we have this sort of microcosm of the human experience in a therapy context, and we're trying to create this reality together. In particular, in a treatment that I've been trained in called dialectical behavior therapy, which was developed by a psychologist named Marshall Linehan for folks with chronic suicidality and/or borderline personality disorder, one of the ideas in that is the yes and, or the dialectic. So there are many truths in the world, and often the opposite of a great truth is another series of truths.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we lean into that and open ourselves up to that, trying to balance both in improv and in therapy, we call it like acceptance and change, that's where all the great stuff comes out of. And I think that's a pretty foundational idea in a lot of treatments, and it's a foundational idea in a lot of improv. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense. And
yeah.
I was thinking one of the parallels I was looking at, I've been looking at different branches of psychology and psychiatry through the ages. Carl Rogers' unconditional positive regard, humanistic psychology, and the idea that there's no right or wrong, and we accept everything. We accept whatever we're given, and we take it as a gift. And I think that's a real important thing to our patients, to be accepted as they are right now.
Oh, exactly. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned, or how I've been trained, and how I communicate with parents and basically everybody, is like, when in doubt, validate. Validate, 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 and then keep validating, and then try to work on problem solving, because so much we're wired to engage in problem solving immediately, telling people what to do, but often telling, unsolicited, I think this is an AA idea, unsolicited advice is criticism in disguise.
Yes.
And so often we just need to hear people and hear their story and just be with them before we try to do anything else.
Right, and notice that judging mind, which as an improviser, when we're on stage, when that judging mind comes in, we're out of the scene, we're out of ourselves.
Exactly, yeah. And so the more that in psychology, mindfulness has been popular across all human traditions, psychology, religion, medicine for a long time. It's become more popular recently. But mindfulness, again, being not judgmental in the present moment, is in theory what you need to be doing to create great improv. And exactly as you said, Margot, like once you start getting out of the moment and either into the past or into the future, then the quality of the relationships, the worlds that you're building, it doesn't click as well.
No, it's pretty hollow, actually. Yes,
exactly. And I think often, I don't know what you think, sometimes when people know that I've been involved in improv, they're saying like, oh, like do you do stand-up comedy and stuff like that? And stand-up comedy is great, but the framework in which you approach that is completely different.
Exactly. We don't do jokes. We may be funny, and we don't have to be funny in improv. That's another thing. We really don't have to be funny, although it helps sometimes. Exactly.
And so often in improv exercises or improv shows, some of the best improv that I've seen, a lot of the best improv is funny, but the reason why it's funny is because you care about the relationships, you believe in the truth on stage. It's not because someone came out and made some whatever bathroom joke that was like so whatever. Or I don't know who said this line, but sort of like, if a swear word, if you say shit in a scene, in improv or anything, and if saying shit, if that's what gets the joke, then there's probably something missing in that conversation, that dialogue, that performance. That can add to it maybe, that can, be something that's surprising, but if that in itself is a joke, that's pretty limited.
Right, exactly. And I've played with people, and I'm still a beginner. I'm 6 years into this myself.
I'm still a beginner too.
Anyway, but I have played with people that immediately want to go to aliens on the moon and get this real high energy going. And high energy is great, but there's no relationship there. Who am I relating to? It's like I'm relating to one of those things that wave outside of a car dealership, those big balloon things.
Yeah. Right. And again, like aliens, and part of the reason why improv is amazing is you need essentially no resources to create any type of narrative in the world. So you and I can do a scene where we're astronauts on the moon and interacting with aliens, but the scene will be, as to use your language, hollow if our relationship, say you're the senior astronaut and I'm more junior and I'm trying to impress you with my knowledge of meteorites or whatever, what is appealing about that is the dynamic, the power, the relationship between us, not so much the sort of content or the astronaut alien thing. The thing that really drives it. That stuff can add to it, but our relationship is really what people are looking for.
Now, did you start improv in high school?
I did, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I had done theater and played music and just been involved. And I'd always really sort of liked like entertaining or performance stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my sophomore year of high school. In my high school, they were putting on a piece of Commedia dell'arte, which is Italian street theater, sort of like old school, the sort of early origins of improvised theater,
right.
At least in the Western world per se. And I hadn't planned on auditioning, and the theater teacher was like, "Oh, Jeff, I think you might like, trying this out." And so I went to the audition, and then got a call back, and then got involved, and then got cast in the show. And that was that was when I was 15 or 16, and that was my first experience, and I loved it. It was amazing. We went to this high school theater festival, and I won an award, or the play won an award. I don't think I was that great, but just this idea of creating all of this content together, building these worlds, building these relationships with the audience, and everybody was just super amazing. And so then I got involved in an improv team, and we started at the high school, and then where I went to college, Grinnell College had a really amazing improv team that I was lucky to get on. I had to audition more than once, but I ultimately got on and then helped sort of run the team when I was a senior. And we did a mix of short and long form improv. It was, it's a small college in the middle of Iowa, so there's not a whole lot going on. And so we would do these shows where tons of people would come, and it was just so fun and this amazing community to be a part of. So I've just been doing it from then.
Now, was there a moment when you were younger, and my narcissism might be showing here, but when you got an applause or a laugh and it went, whoa, or doesn't that thing, are you more into the team building and...
Oh, yeah, I think I would be, for better or worse, when you're performing, we are heavily again, I'm a behaviorist, like a learning theorist, like a researcher, so
right.
We are walking reinforcement-seeking machines. And so, of course, when someone, if I had done that play in high school and hadn't been heavily reinforced by laughter or people saying, great job, or, oh, you're awesome, I don't think I would have kept doing it. But that first experience of getting the call back when I hadn't intended to audition, and then getting a call back, and then getting in to this play, and it was a pretty small cast, so a lot of people had auditioned, was really reinforcing and sort of validating, and like, oh wow, I could be good at this. And then again at college, doing the improv thing, trying out for this team that was quite competitive, and then eventually getting on it was again super reinforcing. And then getting laughs and people saying, oh, you're good at that. I want to keep doing it. Usually we move towards things that we're good at and are reinforced to in terms of the things that we want to spend our time doing.
I was going to ask you about your acting career. Did you ever have a favorite part in a play or a role that really you loved? Or?
Yeah, this is sort of like not generic. It's like so. I don't know. My senior year in high school, I played Puck in Midsummer Night's Dream.
Wow.
And we did it I was also the assistant director because I was doing this sort of like pseudo high school major in theater with some of my other friends. So basically I was the assistant director, or co-assistant director, and was Puck in Midsummer Night's Dream, which is like, every high school does it because it's a great ensemble piece, so there's lots of people, lots of great roles. And we did it, the way that we set it up was, I don't know if it's called like a thrust stage or thrust theater, but basically we did it outside in the courtyard outside of the high school, and so like a third of my lines I delivered upside down in a tree, so like hang upside down in a tree.
Oh, cool.
And so it was just super incredibly fun. The whole family came, and the last day of that play was my last day of high school, so then like I was the last person to bow, so I bowed, and that was like the end of my high school career, so it was just like very intense and meaningful. And I'd had a bunch of solid parts throughout different plays I was in high school, but none where it really sort of got me to sort of showcase. Again, this had a lot of improv in it as well, and so it really sort of was a good match with for what I could do.
I've heard actors say I can never do improv, and I've heard improvisers say, I don't want to do acting. But to me, because I kind of started with both acting and improv at the same time, it's essential to learn acting to be a good improviser, I think. I think it really helps to be a good improviser, take acting, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I think so much. And I think I'm I don't know if I'm a particularly good actor or improviser. I think for me, improv I enjoy it more because I really like being the author of the narrative that I'm creating, or the co-author of the narrative I'm creating. And I think doing I did a lot more theater first, and then did more improv, and now I've done a lot. Haven't done a formal play in a long time. But I think it really helps in terms of just building foundation. It really helps just in terms of getting comfortable on stage and getting comfortable being someone else and all that stuff.
Character work is so great. I want to ask you a question about if you could think of a few really great influences on you, improvisers that have been really big influences on you and your art. Because improv is an art, and as well as a therapy, which we'll have evidence proof research eventually, I think, to make it to call it therapy. But it is an art form. So are there artists that have really, again, influenced you?
That's a good question. I can't think of any. Honestly, the first people I thought of are the two. These are the people who run Vermont Comedy Club in Vermont, Nathan Hartswick and Natalie Miller, who are a husband and wife duo who run this comedy club in Vermont. And I'm forever sort of indebted to them because they basically gave me the opportunity to sort of get re-involved in a pretty serious way in improv a couple of years ago when I moved to Vermont, and then auditioned for their theater and then got involved in the main stage team and was on their touring company. And so they're huge influences to me because they basically gave me this massive opportunity to get involved in improv at a really high level. And they connected me with lots, people, the team that I was on called Napoleon. A lot of we had people from Second City or UCB just come and do trainings and things like that. So I can't think of one particular, I've always admired this person. But just I've just been so lucky to have so many great opportunities to be able to do this kind of work. As far as comedians, I'd say like Aziz Ansari is probably one of my favorite stand-up comedians, and he does a lot of improv. He was in the TV show Parks and Rec, which I actually I've only seen a few episodes of, but from my understanding of that show and then the show Community is ensemble cast with a lot of improvisation in it. And I think him as a stand-up and as someone else who cares a lot about social justice issues, those things come together as well. So I'm really interested in improv and stand-up that can talk about really complicated race, sexual orientation, class, all these types of processes in a ways that brings all communities up, as opposed to putting people against each other or further marginalizing people who are already marginalized. So that's some of the types of comedy that I like, or the types of thinkers that I like. And then the bajillion of many different therapists, psychology researchers, professors that I've had who have been a big influence on me.
Great. So how are you using improv today in your work?
A couple of ways. One thing that's evolved. Are you familiar with DBT at all?
Yes, of course. Yeah. CBT was a standard for a long time. Now it's DBT. We added another initial.
So my main training is in cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and dialectical behavioral therapy, which all come from a behaviorist learning theory tradition.
Right.
And I work in a program right now that is a adherent DBT program, meaning that it is sort of modeled off of all the formal clinical trials that show the efficacy of DBT within particular samples. And so one of the things and part of it is doing DBT skills groups. So training, this is a program for teenagers, but it's also for adults, training folks in using these different cognitive and behavioral and acceptance change type skills. One of the things that we do a lot, both as clinicians who deliver DBT and then for patients who are receiving DBT, is mindfulness exercises, in particular something called participate mindfulness exercises. And basically what participate mindfulness exercises is many of them are improv games or improv type games, because there's lots of ways to engage in what are my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in this moment. How can I manage, increasing anxiety without avoiding it, but moving into it? And there's so many games that you can, improv exercises and more formal games that you can do, particularly in group work. And so a lot of the groups that I do now, whether it's the first 5 or 10 minutes of a group or in the middle of a group to change things up, or as a way of practicing, like doing, exposures to feared stimuli or whatever, using improv exercises. just to get, I mean, again, if you're, just in terms of how people learn, if people are sitting in a room all day and they're depressed or anxious or have, serious mental illness or suicidal or have problems with self-harm, getting people
a family reunion. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Oh, say more about that?
You said, sitting around people who are depressed and suicidal and anxious. I said a family reunion. Sorry, I went for the joke.
No, it's fine. There's an improv game that we used to play called Family Reunion. But that's what I thought you were talking about. And I was like, I haven't done that. I haven't done Family Reunion with them.
That's a new game we're going to play. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, it was great. And so, like things like, Zip, Zap, Zop or Red Ball or I've been doing these different kinds of like memory kinds of exercises just for like sort of like general executive function activation. And for the most part, their exercises and we do more traditional, deep belly breathing and progressive muscle relaxation exercises, which more sort of traditional mindfulness. But these things that get kids, out of their heads and into their bodies a little bit and getting a little silly and managing the emotions that come up, shame, guilt, fear, is really effective. So a lot of people are thinking that these types of exercises in particular are going to be effective for like social anxiety disorder in particular.
Well, I'm certainly excited that you are involved in improv therapy world, and I think we're starting to have more and more folks join us. And I've been finding people in California, in Washington, D.C., all over the country and the world who are therapists using improvisation. So I'm willing to host the first national conference at my house in Florida.
Yes, I can hear the birds in the background. So, I mean, compared to where I am, it sounds very tropical and magical.
It is pretty tropical and magical, but we could have it anywhere. So, any other thoughts that you'd like to share with us on the importance of improv in your life in general?
Yeah, I think the main thing, again, I'm just like a fellow traveler trying to learn this stuff, so I'm no expert in a lot of this content. I think a lot of therapists actually are doing a lot of the things that you and I and others are already doing. We just use different language for it. So I think there are plenty of DBT therapists who are doing probably some of the same exercise that I'm talking about, but they're not necessarily calling them improv or participate mindfulness in the same way. I think also in psychotherapy, or at least in evidence-based psychotherapy, it's, the best treatments are like jazz or like good cooking. So jazz, in order to improvise, you have to really understand foundational chord structures and scales before you can improvise, like on the piano. So if you don't know how to do C major or what F flat is, it's really hard to make stuff up, right? But if you know how to build those foundational things, then it's much easier to grow from that. And the same thing with cooking. If you can follow a recipe, that's a great thing. But once you can add in the local ingredients or the particular palate of the people that you're with or what's in season, again, this is like evidence-based psychotherapy, taking, what's the treatment for depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder, and then how can I use that foundation and then build with this person? And that's how I understand evidence-based practice, and I think improv and all this stuff just fits really well with that. Does that kind of make sense?
It's a beautifully improvised answer. I salute you. Now, Jeff, I'm going to be posting your website when I post this, but is there any other information you'd like to share with our listeners, ways they can see you?
Oh, yeah. Website, if you put just like my personal website, that has my email address and things like that. If people have access to like an academic library like PubMed or PsycInfo or something like that, you can find some of the like academic research that I've been involved with, like peer-reviewed research, and you can find that online, or you can email me and I can send you stuff. A lot of that's not related to improv. That's more depression, anxiety, sort of traditional psychology research. And then I'm in Boston. I currently work at McLean Hospital as an intern, and so that's where I'm at.
And where can we see you perform again?
Yeah, I'm not to be determined. I was performing with the Vermont Comedy Club in Burlington, Vermont for 2-ish years before my wife and I moved to Massachusetts for our training. She's also a clinical psychology PhD person. She works in the Brown system in Providence. So I'm hoping to get involved in some of there's a couple of great improv theaters in Boston, and so this year, just in terms of my work schedule, and I have a pretty long commute, I haven't been able to get super involved, so I'm hoping next year to get a bit more involved in some improv venues. And then also there's a couple of therapists, psychiatrists and psychologists, social workers at McLean who are pretty interested in improv. So I have this pipe dream of starting a kind of like therapy players like Dave and Kristen, Dr. Kruger and Dr. Hartnell have in Chicago, like a therapist, mental health provider, improv team in Boston.
Absolutely. One of my goals too, and teaching improv to therapists.
Exactly. And I think that's a huge area, and I'm very excited about that kind of work as well.
Yeah, I'll be interviewing Lisa Kay soon, who's doing that in Washington, D.C., and she's just brilliant. Yeah. And of course, excuse me, in Boston, my favorite people, Improv Boston, Mike Dakota and Deanna, great group there.
Yeah.
So I've enjoyed our time so much, and I know that we're going to be doing a short 2-person scene soon. So we'll be ending this and perhaps going into our scene and publishing that in a different podcast.
Okay.
But thank you so much. It's so great to see you and talk to you face to face. It's just been wonderful, Jeff.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity. I know we've emailed and heard each other's names through different contexts, so I'm really excited to do this. And again, I think there's so much joy and great content in improv and psychotherapy that both I think can be beneficial to mental health providers and also people who do any type of work where you work with people or anything where you're interested in, again, sort of getting out of your head and into your life a little bit more.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time. And you can hold on for a minute,
sure.
But we're going to say goodbye to our listeners at this point. Jeff Winter, wonderful therapist, PhD candidate, improviser supreme. Bye-bye, Jeff.
Bye. Thanks so much, everyone.